Welcome, everybody, to Bungalows for Bachelors. We are so close to finishing this house. You can walk inside now, and of course, you've got your sheetrock up. It's textured, it's painted, it's starting to look like the rest of your house. Now, 95% of the inside coverage of your house is finished. Well, except for some of the trim that's not been painted yet until later. But, we're getting to the point where it's exciting. You're starting to feel like you're in a house. You're really getting a feel for the spaces. But now we got to put some finishing things in here that are going to make it all, worthwhile and make it into a real home. So today we're going to talk about millwork and doors. So what is / are millwork and doors? Well, doors are doors, right? You use doors to go through openings. You close off spaces in certain ways. You kind of gain some privacy, stuff like that. Those are doors. Everybody knows what doors are. Millwork may not be as obvious. Millwork refers to all of the finished carpentry on the inside of the home that's contributing and is attached to specifically the structure of the home, right? So this is not the same thing as casework. Millwork and casework are different. Casework is things like dressers or furniture, maybe shelving that's like separate from the home itself that you can move around, right? So that's casework. And we're not going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the millwork, which is usually like shelving built into closets, shelving built into the pantries, of course the trim that covers everything up, right? So of course the cabinetry, right? So this is all the finished carpentry on the inside of the home that's going to make more usable space for yourself, so that you're not just like setting everything on the floor, right? Well, we don't want to set things on the floor. We'd like to set things on nicer, cleaner spaces that we can organize. So that's what this stuff is for, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So, what are some types of interior doors? Well, the main type of door that most people are going to go in and out of is a hinged door. There are other doors with hinges as well, but when you refer to a hinged door, you're normally referring to a typical door that's got 2 to 3 hinges on one side of the door. It's got a knob or a lever, and you push it and it swings open and swings closed. That's a hinged door. Pocket doors are where your wall assembly has been built out basically twice as wide as the door that you're going to install, and there's an assembly, a pocket assembly that goes in that space. And half of it's covered up with the sheetrock so that it looks like your door slides into the wall itself and disappears. That's a pocket door. That's used when you need to gain more like walkable, usable area. Hinge doors can be a pain if they like you can't have a good opening direction, or if there's just not a lot of space and you really don't want the door in the way. You can use a pocket door or something like that. Bifold doors are typically used in places where you might want more innovation. Typically, they can be like louvered. They're not always louvered, but that's where they've got all those like slats that create the venting. They don't have to be that way, but frequently they are. But bifold doors are typically a way to get large access to a small space when you don't have a lot of room to have a big door. So let's say you're in a hallway, and right off the hallway you have a laundry room, and the laundry room is literally like 3 feet by 6 feet, right? It's just got the washer and dryer tucked in there, and you don't have the space to swing open 2 huge hinged doors, but you want to be able to access the full space and then close off the full space without taking up a whole bunch of space. And that's where these folding doors come into handy, because they can close off a large area and then open up and not take up a bunch of space. So that's what those are for. Sliding doors are sort of like a tip more, usually they're in 2 places, right? Usually they're for a closet in a bedroom, in less expensive homes or homes that are on a tighter budget. And glass sliding doors. Now those can be used all over the place on all kinds of homes, and on some crazy nice homes, you'll see glass doors that are 16 feet wide and 8 feet tall. They're huge. They have like 4 panes of glass that can completely slide out of the way and totally open up the inside of the house to the outside. And normally that's done from a living room to covered patio transition. That's typically where you're going to see those. But it's a great way of letting a lot of light into your building and being able to vent. And just like, if it's a great, beautiful day outside, you can basically open up your house to the outside, and, get a bunch of fresh air and just, have a party or whatever it is. So those are cool for that. But that's a sliding glass door. But that's where you're going to see those things. And, the reason I refer to them as being normally a little bit cheaper in closets is the doors that are made for that are typically on, relatively inexpensive hardware. They're sort of simple systems, and they're kind of plain. and they just like slide back and forth for closets on some rails. They don't look or sound that nice, but they are effective at, closing off your closet space without having to put a more expensive door in. So barn doors. Barn doors are typically used and maybe an access to a master bedroom, or maybe from a master bedroom to a master bathroom. They're used to visually close off a space. They can be very decorative, and they look very nice. They're usually going to hang on some kind of rail or slide on some kind of system. But the barn door is going to typically open like on a rail, like a barn door would, right? And they're very, you can do like fancy colors with them, wood grain textures. You can do all kinds of cool stuff, and they're used to give that privacy element without fully giving like a total seal off to the space, right? And they can be very pleasant to open and close because you can get fancy open like soft close, soft open systems with them, and they can be very nice to use. So in a space like between the master bedroom and the master bathroom, where you're going to frequently be going in and out and you don't really always need privacy, you can just kind of leave the door slit open on the side and it still looks there as a nice piece. It decorates the wall, makes it look a little better than just a regular door that sits open. And, if you do want some privacy visually, then you just slide it shut. And of course, because of the way these open and close, you're never going to get like air sealing, or you're never going to get sound sealing, sound privacy, anything like that, because these are just there to be kind of a visual privacy element. So that's a barn door. And a doorway is typically going to be used where you're going to be going in and out a lot, right? So a doorway is basically just a fancy word for like where there's wall and ceiling. It's kind of been framed down so that you create a sort of an entrance feeling to a space, like a doorway to a hallway or something like that, right? French doors are typically going to be used. Man, I just realized there's no photos in this, so you get the plain talk today. So the French doors are going to be more like usually a double door, and they're going to be typically an interior space to an interior space. Although they can go to the outside just as well. But typically when you refer to a French door, you're talking about the door that has a big glass pane, and inside the glass pane has the main shape of the glass has been separated into a bunch of smaller rectangles, like a 3x6 or 3x7 spaces. Lights is what we refer to them as. Excuse me. And that is going to be a French door. It's usually for like access to an office where you're going to want to like see out of the space, but you might want sound privacy. So it's like, you maybe have an office with a French door to a living room so you can be working, but maybe keep an eye on the kids or whatever it may be. But that's the French door typical application. And then there's, of course, pre-hung or slabs. So all these types of doors can come pre-hung, well, most of them, pre-hung or just as the slab itself. So the door slab is, the thing that is the size of the door. So if I call out a 3068 door, then the door slab is going to be 3 feet wide, 6 feet 8 tall. And that's what is referred to. So when you buy a slab, you have to hang the door in the wall yourself. And that requires some decently complex carpentry skills in terms of getting everything level and plumb and aligned and the word's not coming to mind, but where you have to kind of let into the wood door your hardware and things so everything's nice and flush. It's a little bit complex sometimes. So most of the time, unless you're like really enjoy hanging doors, people just buy pre-hung doors. And basically what that means is the door is already going to be hinged and attached to the jambs of the door that go all the way up and over around the door. So and there's usually not a door handle in it, or door hardware in terms of opening and closing it, but it's already been hung on the hinges. So you just take that pre-hung assembly, you slide it into its place in this opening that you have, and you shim it and stack it and move it around and adjust it and level it and everything how you need to so the door functions right, and screw it in the walls. And that's it. The assembly is just screwed in and boom, you got your door. It's all good to go. It is typically, of course, more expensive than buying a slab, but in terms of the labor you're going to save trying to spend time hanging the door, it's usually a better idea just to go pre-hung. And of course, hidden doors are an example of using kind of that custom finished carpentry style to maybe take a bookshelf or something and put some hidden hinges on it somewhere so that you can gain access to a hidden room or something of that sort. So, there are hidden doors in houses sometimes when you want to keep your guns and money safe or something like that. So, types of millwork. So, the millwork section, right, is initially not initially is mainly talking about like the storage spaces and the trim. So why do we put cabinetry in kitchens and in places where, let's say like a head knocker above a toilet, right? It's called a head knocker because it's above a toilet where you might hit your head on it. And you'd want storage in those places that looks nice, that's exposed, right? So you can keep your toilet paper, toiletries. In a kitchen, you'd want to keep, of course, not your silverware. I don't know who keeps silverware up in their cabinetry. Well, the base cabinetry, I suppose. But yeah, so these are nice places to store things and be surfaces to work on, right? The cabinetry. And of course, the shelving for open storage and closets and places like that. So you're not going to want some fancy cabinetry in a closet. That'd be kind of silly. And then, of course, the trim. Now, the whole purpose of the trim is to transition one surface to another surface in a way that looks appealing. It adds like depth, structural, it adds architectural depth to elements. You can do fancy things, fancy shapes, multiple layers. Generally, the more trim that's put on, the fancier things look, and it's just more visually appealing to the eye. I couldn't tell you why. It's just, the other day I saw a house that had like 4 fascia boards of different depths on it before you get up to the roof layer, and it just looked great. So, trim is one of those things where you want to, of course, conceal your transitions. So like at the bottom of a wall, your sheetrock is going to stop maybe a quarter to a half an inch above the floor. And you don't just want to leave that there. And of course, your flooring is going to go up to that and it's going to stop pretty close, but it's not going to look perfect. And you got to make that transition somewhere. So that's kind of what the baseboard is for. It's going to cover up that seam, going to get caulked and painted. It looks real nice. So, that's what all these trim pieces are for. So the baseboard is the thing that covers the transition between the wall and the floor. You can also do crown moldings, which are a transition between the wall and the ceiling. Now, typically, that does not need to be like covered up because you're just going to have a painter that comes in and cuts a nice paint line, and that's not an important transition if there's 2 colors even. So, but crown moldings look nice. It's a cool transition, material. So that's another type. It's similar to the baseboard. It's just going to go on the top side instead. Casing, it normally refers to like the trim on the wall around a window or a door. So if you're doing, and this is where kind of words get, a little convoluted, but if you're talking about a window, nowadays in like modern construction, relatively new homes, sort of like tract home building, you're not really going to see a lot of casing around windows. What you're usually going to see is a sill and an apron on the bottom of a window, and then the window is cased out with just sheetrock. It's just a drywall put around it. So when you put that window in from the outside, you're going to have like 3 or 4 inches, depending on the wall thickness. You're going to have like 3 or 4 inches of exposed stud where you just didn't have, there's just a framing is right there. That was the hole you used to put your window in. So nowadays, most of the time, the sides and the top are just finished out with sheetrock. So the drywaller guys are going to come in and they're going to hang a piece of sheetrock on the inside face of that window on the sides and on the top, and they'll put that corner bead, whether it's round or square, they'll put that corner bead up around the sides and up to the top and back down the other side. And then they're going to terminate that into a wood or MDF, whatever material, sill board, which is like the flat board that's going to go on the bottom of the window that you can like set stuff on. And the apron is typically a way that transitions that board into the wall, which is going to be the flat trim that goes up against the wall underneath the sill. That's the apron. So that's typically what those are for. If you have a fancier home or you've specified for more trim, then you can get the jambs, the sides, and the lintel or the top of the window to be trimmed out differently. You can use wood in some cases. Of course, you'll pay more for that, for the higher finished carpentry cost, but it does look a little bit nicer. And so that's what the lintel is. The lintel is like the header. It's like the upper piece. Like a typical old craftsman style header or lintels, you're going to see that the trim is not only wider than like the opening, right? So you're going to have an overhang of like a half an inch or an inch or something on both sides, but it's also going to be thicker. It's going to be deeper. It's going to stand out from the other trim just a little bit more so that you get more like contrast and depth. So it's just the little things that make houses look a little bit nicer. So that is the lintel. And of course, the jambs are going to be the sides of those things. Now, for doors, again, in typical tract homes, you're just going to see a simple plain casing that usually matches the baseboard. It's just going to come straight up from the ground. It's going to have a miter, which is a 45-degree cut into the top piece of casing, and that's going to turn and go back down the other side of the door. Looks pretty plain, but it it covers up that the gap between the jamb of the door. When you installed that pre-hung door, now you've got this jamb and like a 1/4-inch gap, and then somewhere in there is your sheetrock that starts. So that's what this casing is going to cover up. It's going to go but over top of that gap and make it look nice. And that casing is going to run all the way down to the ground, to the bottom. Of course, you don't want to run it straight down into the, let's say if a slab, you don't want to run in the concrete because then you don't have a gap for your flooring to get underneath. You don't want to do that to your poor flooring contractor. It also won't look as nice. So, that is what the doors are normally trimmed out like. And then, of course, once the door casings are on, the baseboard is usually just going to butt into the existing casing for the door and go, around that way. So typical order of these things, and these things can vary a little bit because they're not really related to each other. But you're going to start putting your interior doors in, your bedroom doors, closet doors, pocket doors, you name it, where all the doors are going to go. You buy a bunch of pre-hung door assemblies that say you get them all delivered. You go like place them all where they're going, and then you just start hanging doors, right? So that's the interior doors portion. The cabinetry is going to be a little more complicated, right? So you're going to have some kind of plan for where all the cabinetry was supposed to go. The base cabinets are going to be this size here, this size here. We got a trash, drawer here. We got a sink here. The wall cabinets, of course, hopefully when you were framing, you blocked out lines where your cabinetry were going to go so that you can screw in properly. All these cabinets can get screwed to the wall properly. And hopefully when you were framing, you made that portion of, and anywhere cabinetry is going to be mounted to a wall, when you're framing, you really need to pay attention to making sure that that part of that house has a flat wall. Because if it doesn't have a flat wall and it's curved or it's got some studs sticking out in one spot, it's really going to be hard to make that cabinetry look really nice and straight. And, all the cabinets butt up nice and clean together, and that's all look great. So you got to pay attention to that when you're framing. But your cabinetry is going to go in, put the bases in, put the wall cabinets in any not in any particular order. Of course, that's and you might want to, let's say, trim out the back of the cabinetry to the wall. You may want to take like a 1/4 round piece of trim and trim that out too. So it's all part of making everything blend and making all the transitions look nice. So cabinetry is going to go on. Of course, you can go put shelving in at really any point because typically your closet shelving and things like that are just going to be midsections up the wall. And of course, when you were framing, hopefully you knew where you wanted your shelves to go and how you wanted to support the shelves, because you would want blocking behind places where you need to be screwing into the wall, right? You don't want to use drywall anchors for any of this stuff if you can avoid it. So, you put all your shelving in, and that can just kind of go in however you like. And the window and door casing and ancillary elements. So you're going to, before you do the baseboards at least, you're going to want to do the window and door casings. And that's for the window, it doesn't matter as much. But for the doors, it's because you really need that door casing to come all the way down so that your baseboard has a place to start. And of course, your baseboards aren't going to usually be done until after your flooring is installed. That way you can just, boom, pop them right down onto the flooring, nail them to the wall, good to go, no problems there. If you're feeling risky and frisky, you can try to install your baseboard very carefully, knowing the existing flooring you're going to use. But like if it's a tile floor or something, that's pretty risky because you never quite know, how the tiler is going to, how thick his grout layer is going to be, or not grout layer, his mortar layer is going to be, and all those things. So there's some variables there, so you want to be careful. It's just going to look better usually if the baseboards are done afterwards. So And of course, crown molding. If that's going on the wall ceiling transition, there's pretty much nothing that's going to get in the way of that unless you have some high windows where you've got like a lintel trim or casing that's going to be up close to that crown molding. Those might interfere with each other, but most of the time you can just put that crown molding on whenever. But that's typical order of when these things are going to be installed. If you would like to learn more, then I always recommend watching the Spec House series, episodes 110, 113 through 17, and 120 by The Essential Craftsman. Again, that whole series, just watch the whole thing because it's going to cover all your bases. And you ought to watch the YouTube video, How to Install a Pre-Hung Door 3 Different Ways by Home Renovation DIY, and watch YouTube video, 11 Tricks for Perfect Kitchen Cabinets by Home Renovation DIY. That guy's just pretty good in general about talking about how to go through and like fix things in your home that are the finishing elements usually. That's why his name's going to start popping up more, because we're in the finishing part of this process and we are almost done. Our house is almost complete. I'm excited. You're excited. We're all having a good time. So I will see you on the next one. We're almost there.